We are approximately 1 month out from the launch of Ancient Call on the global servers of Langrisser Mobile, and you might be asking yourself, what is Ancient Call? How do I prepare for this? What am I fighting? My name is Loomis, and today I am going to do my first of a series of videos covering the different Ancient Call fights. And the one we're going to start with today is the Huginn and Muninn fight, which is the fight that people ask me the most questions about on Discord, so I thought that would make it the most logical start place. So, who is Huginn and Muninn? It's this guy. Otherwise known as H&M for short, which is how I'm going to refer to them throughout the rest of the video. So, H&M has two different phases through the fight. The first is the odd phase, where he looks like the picture on the left here. They are combined into one unit. There's an infinite attack counter range. And anytime you attack H&M, your unit will get a Whisper debuff applied on you. Now, the Whisper debuff will basically make you do a 2-square radius attack int or defense MDef debuff to all the units around you. It's very similar to one of those time laws that we've definitely had in Timeless Trial before. And it's for 50% of all. So if you get this stacked on you too many times, your stats will go to 0, and you don't want that to happen. And starting in phase 3, it will then inflict 2 debuffs per round. He is immune to all debuffs, so you can't use anything to lower stats or help you take him down quicker. And he will cast a 2-square AoE attack if there are 3 units within 2 squares of him at the end of the turn. So you want to make sure that you are moving your units in a way that are not stacking around him, otherwise he's going to cream you with an AoE. Now, once you've beaten the odd phase, he will split into the 2 parts, into Huginn and Muninn respectively. So, right now they have no perks, so they're just 2 units that you have to get rid of. They have relatively low HP, so Huginn has only about 97k and Muninn only has about 140k, but they're pretty strong offensively, and especially at the beginning of the battle, the Huginn is definitely one-shottable by most, people, as long as you have the right units. The damage dealt does add to your overall score of this. Now, there's other fights where there's different phases, and when you're in the alternative phase, it does not add to your score, but fighting Huginn and Muninn apart do add to your score overall. And once you defeat both of them, he will immediately respawn back in the odd phase. So there are other fights where once you have beaten the phase, the boss will not respawn until the beginning of the next turn. But once you defeat Huginn and Muninn, he will respawn. Now, I should mention, though, once you've killed him on the odd phase, he will stay stunned, and you can use your other units to come in for a hit. So that mechanic has not changed, but he will respawn immediately when you defeat Huginn and Muninn. So, on the odd phase, his moves, he has Ancient Blessing, which basically he gets a damage reduction buff every turn. The order is melee physical magic, and it's always gained at the end of the turn. So on the very first turn, and every turn he responds, he will not have this damage reduction buff. So you're going to want to beat Huginn and Muninn in the even phase and line it up with the correct turn timing, so you ensure that you have the right Ancient Blessing to queue when you want to start taking him down again. He has a skill called Flying Tackle, which is basically just a single target powerful attack that will stun you for 1 turn, so you have to make sure a unit that can be stunned, a unit that you don't need to use that next turn, can eat the hit. In phase 3, it will also then apply a Whisper-like debuff, and it goes from physical to magic damage. And then he has Screech, which is an AoE. It's a map-wide attack, you cannot avoid it. And then after the 3rd phase, he will also knock your move down by 1. And the attack order is he'll go single target AoE normal attack, single target AoE normal attack. So just important to keep in mind what attack is coming up so you can move accordingly. Now the even phase moves, Huginn has a curse attack, which is just a single target magic damage, and it will reduce your attack. So you want to make sure that doesn't happen. And the reason why you want to try to snipe Huginn as fast as possible is that he will reduce his range damage by 300%. If you don't snipe him right away. Now, the interesting thing about H&M is that instead of being the regular boss monster type class, in both phases, it's actually a flyer. So, as we all know, flyers are weak to bows, and bows are range damage. So you'll want to make sure that you snipe him out of the sky before he can increase this range damage buff, or you might have some trouble taking him out. Muninn has Flying Tackle, very similar to the Odd Phase, but it does not do the stun this time. Rather, it just decreases intelligence. And then his version of the Ancient Blessing is the same, except the conversion slightly different. So you want to make sure that you take them down as fast as possible. Now, you might be asking yourself, what units do you bring to H&M? Now, we did talk about how, they're flyers, so you'll definitely want to bring bows. But, where we start is that there are two factions in particular that get the buff, get the stat buff for this fight, and that's the Protagonist faction and the Glory faction. So, any units belonging to one of these two factions are going to get a 100% stat boost throughout the fight. So it's very important that you try to bring units that are on faction. Now, the general setup for a team composition for H&M is you're going to want Narm, and I'll explain why in a second. You're going to want a mass attack unit. You're going to want a mass protect unit. You'll have 2 support units, and then a flex spot. So I will cover all 6 of these throughout the rest of the video. So the most logical starting point is Narm, and why have I singled out Narm in particular? Well, Narm is the single strongest anti-air unit in the game. Between her skills, her class, and everything else she has to offer, she is by far and away the strongest unit you can bring to H&M for DPS, and she actually is able to, as a solo DPS, lead you to an S rank, assuming that you have all the other support units correct and on meta. So, the skills you'll bring with Narm are Snipe, Deadeye, and Roundabout. Now, you really want the Roundabout because not only does it increase her damage, but it lets her move out of the range after she attacks and allows you to position yourself better to avoid the AoE and just, get into a better position for follow-up turns, making sure you might want to get onto some terrain so she can have her Sky Archers have their perks buffed up. Now, the important thing in this fight is that she needs to maintain 100% damage reduction. Now, this might sound like a tall task. However, she will get 40% from Last Rites. She'll get 50% from Attack Blessing. So that obviously insinuates that we'll need to bring Tiaras. She'll get 15% for Must-Sees. And for those of you doing math at home, now we're at 105% damage reduction when you're attacking. But on defense, we're still not at 100%. So how do we fix that? Well, on both offense and defense, you went from Tranquility, Landius's command aura. We now have 100% damage reduction throughout the fight, both on offense and defense. So this obviously means that you need to bring Tiaras and Landius, but we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. And she'll use her Sky Archer, so she can have unlimited terrain maneuvering, and also because as a bow hero is strong against H&M, so are bow troops. So Sky Archers are probably the best offensive troops she has, so she will want to use the Sky Archers. In terms of equipment, you're going to want to bring any bow that has plus 10% attack. Any of them are fine. Obviously, you'll want the Last Rites for the damage reduction. King's Crown is nice because it applies a damage buff to someone else, but the helmet is not particularly important. I'd say out of all 4 pieces of equipment, this is by far the least important one for her. And then obviously Slayer's Emblem, because you want to give her the extra attack, and Slayer's Emblem has a 12% increased attack against flyers, so you want to do as much damage against flyers as possible. So that's why you want to bring Narm. So we definitely talked about 2 other characters that we probably want to bring for this on here, and the first one, as a support you're going to want to bring, is Tiaras. Now, Tiaras typically is going to want to run Heal, Attack Blessing, and Miracle. And you might say to yourself, hey, Attack Blessing has a cooldown between, the time it's up and the time Tiaras can cast it. So the important thing for this fight is that if you have a teddy bear, you can put it on Tiaras, and then suddenly Narm will have Attack Blessing with 100% uptime, which is very important. So if you've been pulling for the teddy bear, or sometime between now and when Ancient Call launches, you're able to luck sack a Juggler Pillow from Timeless Trial or some other way, bully for you, and this fight will suddenly become a lot easier. So that's something you definitely want to keep your eye out for. And Miracle, because Teddy Bear only affects single target assist skills, it does not affect Miracle, but Miracle definitely does help a lot by giving both an extra damage buff and a damage reduction buff. Although, if you need it for your team, she can definitely bring Mass Heal over Miracle. And in terms for equipment, it's, everything's pretty standard here. You want Tenyos to fish for buffs potentially. Teddy Bear, we already talked about. If you don't have a Teddy Bear, you probably want to consider a Goddess tier, so she can help dispel some of the debuffs you get, and the rest of it's pretty standard just for a healer. Now, the other unit we talked about earlier with Narm is Landius, because we want his Tranquility Aura. So the 3 skills I would recommend you bring on Landius are Indomitable, Tranquility, and Iron Helmet. Now, Indomitable is obvious, because if he gets one shot, he revives. And then Tranquility gives 15% range damage reduction, and it's a 2-square aura, 3 squares when it's active, so it's a huge command aura that's tremendously beneficial throughout the fight. Now, you could bring his Legend Faction buff, however, the thing about Ancient Call is, with the 100% stat boost, it does not stack with a faction buff. So the stats you get from a faction buff do not apply, however, the extra effect you have, so that will still apply to units within the Ancient Call fight. Now, the one from Landius's faction buff isn't particularly useful for this fight, nor are we really fighting with a lot of legend units, so in my opinion it's better to forego it, and rather I think Iron Helmet is probably the best skill to bring here. It just gives you a little bit extra insurance, and if you can proc it, it could definitely help you eat another hit that you might not be able to take, so might as well just go for that, because it actually has, some potential usefulness, if not just RNG stuff. In terms of equipment, you want the Dragon Slayer Gram, you want high HP, so with any of these Ancient Call fights, when you're getting 100% stats, the boss every turn gains 3% stats, so eventually the boss is going to get so strong that he's going to be able to just AoE one-shot you with whatever move they have to AoE, and the best way to prolong the fight as long as possible is by having as much HP as possible. So you'll notice a theme throughout this video of the equipment I'm recommending typically have HP bonuses on them, because you want to stack that HP as high as possible. So that's kind of the logic behind some of these choices. So now I mentioned that you want to bring a mass attack and a mass defend unit. So there's really one logical mass defend unit, so I will cover her first, and that is Liana. So the 3 skills you want to bring on Liana are Heal, Act Again, and Mass Defend. Now, why do you want Mass Defend? Mass Defend is used to give immunities to your team to help against the Whisper debuff. So that's why you want both a Mass Attack and a Mass Defend, because if you have both immunity to defense and MDef down and attack int down, you're not going to be able to be affected by Whisper, which is important. So that's why you want a Mass Defend unit, and Liana's a very sensible one, because she has a great kit, she's able to dispel things, she's able to passively heal, she has Act Again, and she has a Mass Protect. So any Liana under 6 star will definitely need a Goddess tier, and that's just to make sure that she can remove as many debuffs as possible, because there are downtime on some of these skills, so you might still get debuffed nonetheless, so you want to avoid that as much as possible. And even at 6 star, it's not the worst thing. I mean, her accessory isn't the biggest deal. She can't really equip a Teddy Bear, because none of these are single target assist skills, so it doesn't really matter, and the rest is pretty standard. So now you have the Mass Attack, and there are really 2 options for Mass Attack here, and they both have their pros against each other, so I'm going to focus on what the pros are. So the first one I'm going to show you is Chris. Now, Chris has the skills you would want to bring with her are Strengthen, Dispel, and Mass Attack. So Strengthen's just because she doesn't really have another 1-cost skill that's particularly useful, and it's also just a single target Mass Attack. Dispel for dispelling, obviously, and then obviously Mass Attack. So the pros that Chris has is that she's on faction, so she gets the stat boost, which is really important. She is an extra Dispel unit, so she has Dispel through the skill, she has Dispels in her talent, and she can potentially equip a Goddess tier. And she also can give random buffs both through her talent and by equipping a Tenyos headdress. So this is the recommended equipment I would think with her. Now, if you have a Gift of Eternal Life, this also provides an additional source of potential healing through attacking. Because she's a little bit more special, she's able to equip Last Rites instead of a Tenyos dress, which Last Rites definitely helps with survivability more. So, Chris is a very solid option for a mass attacker. The only drawback is that, generally speaking, you will need to use 2 runes on Chris in order to have mass attack, and not everybody has that, so, it might be not a good use of resources for you to put 2 runes on Chris. Now, the other option is Varna, and the big downside to Varna is that she is not in either the protagonist or glory factions. So she will not get the 100% stat buff, but she has some other interesting things in her kit. So the 3 skills that she'll bring are Aim, Defense Support L, and Mass Attack. Now, Aim is great because it runs the timer on her cooldowns, and which is my first pro. And Mass Defense Support is very interesting because, one, it gives automatically immunities to both defenses and through Mass Attack if you actively use it. But the other thing with Defense Support L is that it also grants 15% decreased damage. So it's another source of decreased damage for your team, which is great for this fight. The other thing with Varna is that she also has an Archer class and access to Sky Archers, which is something that you definitely might want to consider doing for this fight. Now, I'm thinking that you're going to use her as a flyer anyways, so this is where my equipment recommendations come from. Because when you use her as a flyer, the Throne Guardian gives her both the attack and 5% HP, which is nice. And then the rest are just different things that you probably want to bring. King's Crown is incredible on Varna because she is a support unit anyways, and she has Aim. She can potentially apply King's Crown to more than 1 unit in a turn. So Varna has a bunch of great things for this fight. Just her big drawback is that she's not on faction. So if you are someone who does a lot of PvP and you have a Varna, it might be a lot more sensible for you to bring her instead of Chris because, you might not use Chris or you might not want to use the 2 runes on her. But it kind of really depends on your team. So, you can't really use Varna without 2 runes as well. So it really kind of depends on the situation. They're both good mass attackers, but it's completely contextual based on your team. Now, the other option you could use for mass attack if you don't have either, and when I say use for mass attack, that comes with a big asterisk, is actually Rachel. And that's because Rachel has access to Gospel. So Gospel can definitely replace Chris and Varna as your mass attack unit because it grants debuffs to it grants immunity to all debuffs, but it's definitely nowhere near as good because it's just one single target attack. And the nice thing about Rachel is that she's definitely a better source of DPS potentially than either Chris or Varna could be, because she can do some DPS, she dispels when she attacks, and she has Sky Archers, which is nice. And the other thing with Rachel is that she also has Holy Pegasus, so she can definitely equip Holy Pegasus too. Now, for those of you who don't know, level 10 Holy Pegasus, when their HP is above 50, 100% of the time will grant a 50% damage decrease. So that's, she can survive a long time throughout the fight with those equipped. And then this is the general equipment I'd recommend for her. My mistake there, I should not have the Slayers there. Obviously, Rachel should not be using a Slayer's emblem. That's a mistake on my end. But the Teddy Bear is a good idea for Rachel here because Gospel is a single target assist skill. So you can definitely run Gospel for 3 turns, which is interesting. I personally would not recommend using Rachel for this fight over one of the other 2 mass attack units, but I just thought, I would mention her as a legitimate alternative. Now, the last spot I mentioned is Flex. And what exactly is Flex? Now, there's kind of 2 different approaches behind the Flex. Now, if you're looking to just S rank, you might want to bring a unit that can help you do more or help Narm do more damage. But if you want to go on the leaderboard, you're probably going to need to bring a second Archer. And so I'm going to start off with those units. So the first option for a second Archer is Sigma. And he's, in my opinion, probably the best option as a second Archer. So the 3 skills he will be bringing are Neutralizing Fire, that's Sneak, and then Strong Wind Snipe. And similar to Narm, your primary DPS, he also is going to want to maintain 100% damage reduction. Now, a large chunk of Narm's damage reduction comes from Attack Blessing, and obviously we cannot Attack Blessing 2 units. So where will this come from? Well, We'll get we'll get 40% from last rites again. We'll get 30% from equipping a Spirit Griever. Sigma gets 20% from Sneak. And he'll also get the 15 from Tranquility and Rough Seas. So it's pretty easy for Sigma to hit this 100 damage reduction threshold, which is great. And as such, this is the equipment I recommend. So obviously 2 of these equips are, or sorry, 3, including Slayer's Emblem, are all non-negotiable, because 2 of them you need for the damage reduction, and the other is for extra damage. And then the helmet, I think King Crown is a good option, but again, any of the helms kind of work. Now, the second option you have for a second archer is Illustrial, who we will be getting later this week on releasing the game on the next update. So, Illustrial skills you want to bring are Neutralizing Fire, Emerald Magic Arrow, and Roundabout. Now, similarly, she wants to maintain 100% damage reduction. She'll get 40% from the last rites again, 30 from Spirit Regriever, and from Tranquility and Rough Seas. If you add all that up, that adds to 100. So it's, again, reasonably easy for her to maintain that 100% damage reduction. The other interesting thing, though, with Illustrial is that she gets Holy Pegasus. So she can actually equip Ullr's Bow with Holy Pegasus for an insane amount of damage reduction and, snipe from far away. And just gives another option for you. Now, Ullr's Bow, you get the trade-off of the negative 10 damage, but being able to equip Holy Pegasus does give you a little bit more options for the fight. So I would not recommend Ullr's Bow on anyone else. However, it is something that is viable on Illustrial. So just something I wanted to mention there. And then the third option for a second archer is Matthew. And the skills Matthew would bring are Snipe, Attack Command, and Roundabout. So he's going to get his damage reduction the exact same way Illustrial would. And then Attack Command is hugely beneficial because it not only buffs up his attack, but if you position him correctly, he will also be able to give an extra 10% attack to Narm. And, when you have a boosted Narm with 100% stats already, that extra 10% is really going to add a lot of extra oomph. So, again, this is the same loadout for all these archers. There's really only one way you can hit 100% damage reduction without Spirit Griever. So, the loadouts are all going to look the same. Now, the interesting thing about Matt, though, is that you can also run him as just a buffer if you don't have him as an archer unit. So I think that it's best when he's a flyer because he can bring Air Slash, Attack Command, and Gale. And really, the reason you're just bringing him here is if you don't have a second archer, you want to buff Narm's damage as much as possible. So bringing Matthew is really just for Narm. Park him next to Narm. He can do some DPS through Air Slash, really, but he's really just kind of in that fight to buff up Narm. And then the equip I would recommend as a flyer, you want the Throne Guardian for the extra HP, Last Rites for survivability, you might as well equip the Slayer's Emblem if you're going to do some DPS, so that's definitely an option if you have a flyer mat. And then the last option for flex is Elwyn. And Elwyn, I would recommend you bring Faction Buff, Crush, and Frontal Assault. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the faction buffs don't give any stats, but they do give the extra effect. So the faction buff that Elwyn has gives 15% damage to any unit that has 80% or more health. That's Glory Faction. So it's basically just a Narm buff, and he can do some DPS through Frontal Assault and Crush. He's not going to be a huge source of that, but he's really just kind of there to provide the extra 15% damage for Narm. And then again, we're just looking at HP equips for him to wear. So, it's pretty business as usual and pretty standard for him here. So, who am I going to use for this fight? Well, obviously, I'm going to use Narm, because Narm is your key to an easy S-rank clear. So, I will use Narm. I will use Landius, because I want the Tranquility command for my team. I will bring Liana as my mass protect unit. I'll bring Tiaris for attack blessing. I will bring Varna as my mass attack unit. So I do PvP, and I have a very well built Varna. So I think that it makes a lot more sense for me just to bring the unit I already have built, rather than investing 2 runes into Chris, who is a unit I would never who I would never otherwise use. And then for my 6th unit, I plan on bringing Illustrial. I was not able to get a Sigma in his opening banner, and I therefore have to get Illustrial because I do not have an Archer mat. So if I want to have two Archers, she is my only choice. I'm going to be planning on trying to get Clara anyways, so let's see how many Illustrials I pull this upcoming week. So this is the team of 6 I will be using, and I think I should be able to hit S rank with my guys. I will update you guys in like a month when it opens and we can find out. But this is right now the 6 I'm planning to use. So that's my guide on H&M, and I really appreciate you guys for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you could hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions about any of the Ancient Call fights, but Huginn and Muninn in particular, please feel free to leave a comment below or reach out to me on Discord. I'm pretty easy to find on Discord. I'm Loomis, hashtag 5217. I'm on main court. I'm in a bunch of servers. I'm pretty easy to find. So any questions at all, please let me know, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you later.